back to spring practice. All right, this is one of those much anticipated spring practices because there are so many questions. I mean, you can just take your pick, and I'm going to kind of use Chris Walsh article from Bleacher Report to kind of talk about, everybody's talking about there is no quarterback battle, and I've been saying that, and I'm going to continue to say it. But there is a question regarding the quarterback position and how and that question was asked by Chris Walsh is, how will Jalen Hurts work with the offensive coordinator, Brian Daboll? I don't think he's going to have any problem working with him. I don't think he's going to have any problem working with him. I think the challenge will be, how are they going to implement this offense in such a way that he gets everything he needs for the spring without giving away everything in the spring? In other words, you can't fake it till you make it at quarterback. You can't come out like in most positions. You can run vanilla offensive plays and be good. In other words, you can run the basic lead and the basic dive and the counters at running back and the linemen get their blocks because there's only so many blocking schemes. Okay, so you can run some vanilla plays, get most of your cuts, most of your angles down at running back, most of your angles down at offensive line. But when it comes to route running and reading your progression, the only way to get good at that is to do it. And the only way to get really good at it and to get the right timing is to do it as fast as possible and as full speed as possible. So I think that in and of itself is going to be one of the biggest challenges in the spring is, how does Alabama put in this new offense when they have a quarterback they absolutely want to protect like no other time before? I know we've had quarterback battles in the past, and Tua and Mac Jones are both going to push Jalen in terms of competition, but they're not pushing him for starting position. They're pushing him for, hey, if you mess up, we're right here in the wings waiting. But my question and challenge is, how does Daboll, Saban, and others get this offense put in while trying to protect the quarterback who doesn't go full speed normally anyway in the spring? But this year, there's no way they're going to let there be any hits ever. I mean, like, guys are going to be required to, fall down when they get past an offensive lineman so they don't accidentally bump into the quarterback in their black jersey. So that'll be an interesting scenario of how they actually get this offense in such a way, because they're not going to put anything on film that's going to help Florida State prepare for them in the big kickoff. Another big question, he mentioned the Minkah Fitzpatrick question. Where does Minkah play? Wherever he wants, James. I can tell you that. Wherever he wants, safety, free safety, strong safety, star, cornerback, wherever Minkah wants to play, this guy is so talented. So my question isn't where he plays. My question is who steps up and fills the roles that were vacated by. And, I know we filled Eddie Jackson for in a certain way, James. But did we really fill in for Eddie Jackson? Because Eddie Jackson was on the sideline screaming pick play on the last play of the game. That's the part Minkah did some leadership and some really, really good stuff. But when you move Minkah from here, who took that leadership role where Minkah stepped out from? And so who's going to be the top dog, or who's going to be the other guy when Minkah doesn't communicate? Who's going to be that other guy? That's the question that I'm asking, because Eddie Jackson was replaced talent-wise, but just think if somebody on the field had been there to yell pick play instead of Eddie Jackson screaming it from the sideline.
So are we talking about the Chiefs and the Indians type of analogy here as far as leaders and also the worker bees, kind of that analogy when it comes to the team?
Yeah, when you look at it, what you want is who's going to be the guy who – it's one thing to lead by example, and that's great and that's awesome. But in the heat of the battle, you need a guy that will lead by example, and you need a guy who will communicate. Okay? There's great that people can look and say, man, he goes about his business in the right way. He goes about his business and he does it right. He does it every time. But in the heat of the moment, when there needs to be communication, when there needs to be guys moved around, who's going to be that guy? And I think we missed that a little bit with Eddie in the heat of the moment of that national championship game. I wonder what would have happened if he had been there to maybe get some guys in the right spot, in the right place on that last drive. Minkah can step up and do that, but now you lose what Minkah was doing at that level below. It's not always just this guy who communicates. It's the guy who communicates to the next guy and gets everybody in order. So, and that to me leads to the next question of wide receiver. A guy I think we're going to miss and we're not talking about this guy at all, is Ardarius Stewart. Will Ardarius Stewart be missed as much for his route running? Probably not. The guys who are coming in this year, Trayvon Diggs, Robert Foster, even, if he sticks around, may be more talented a route runner than Ardarius Stewart. But Ardarius Stewart brought something to the game that you can't find just because they're talented. He brought an attitude to that receiving core that they played nasty. They were aggressive. He also brought blocking. What is one constant that Nick Saban has always had at wide receiver is a good blocker. Who's going to be that guy? Ridley is a great leader, but he's quiet. He's not the guy that gets in people's face from what I've heard. So who's going to replace Ardarius Stewart's mindset, his attitude, and his vocal leadership? Why is that important, James? Not from a talent standpoint of getting routes and running routes and all of that. If Alabama goes back to a more pro-style downhill running game, people always talk about the offensive lineman, and that's great. And that's where it all starts. But you don't win a Heisman Trophy. You don't have the leading rushers in Alabama's history without wide receivers. There is no Mark Ingram without Julio Jones, because those 35-yard runs become 7-yard runs. And I don't know that we have a wide receiver right now that brings what Ardarius Stewart brought to the table. That's just three big questions that I have. I'll hit a couple more at the end of the show, but we got coming up in the next segment, we're going to have our word association, and also in the third quarter, we're going to have our last edition of the Mindset Manifesto interview with Dr. Brett McCabe, where he breaks down his book. So, and then in the fourth quarter, we'll have our 2-minute warning. But we're going to be answering these questions all spring long. If you want to see that article that I was referencing just from a topic standpoint, not really the content, you can go out to bleacherreport.com, click Chris Walsh, click on his tweet. A lot of other great questions still out there, and we'll be breaking those down as we move throughout the spring.